Yes. So I
Yeah.
want to make a statement before I make a question, right? So my statement to you is, can you imagine, Dr. Francis, that here in America, due to European colonialist views and the fact that they control the school systems, there's a conversation that happens among African Americans that challenge our claim to Israelite identity and ancestry. There are some African Americans that say, show me where there are people in West Africa in ancient days that were practicing the Torah. That cannot be found. There are people here in America, Dr. Francis, that says, show me where the culture of Torah is being practiced by any indigenous African in Nigeria or Ghana or anywhere in West Africa. So now that we have someone here, Dr. Francis, I want you to use the moment, the opportunity, and the time to respectfully, because we don't mean to be demeaning towards our brothers and sisters. The aim is always to educate and uplift and never to demean. But I want you to use the opportunity to educate our lesser informed brothers and sisters to the fact that for hundreds, if not thousands of years, there have been people, at least in Igbo land, that have been practicing the culture and the tradition that we find in the Torah, known among Igbo as Omenana. Could you please teach us about that?
Thank you very much, Rabbi. Now, if somebody says, show me a place in West Africa where they practice the culture of Israel, somebody can only say that if he has never been exposed to the culture of the Igbo, what we call Omenana. Um, like you said, we have to talk respectfully, um, so that we do not raise unnecessary controversies. If you study Omenana and you compare the Omenana that we practice with what is in the Torah, you will find it very difficult to find any other subpopulation of Israelites who practice it to the extent that the Igbos have practiced it. And it is not, and still practice it. And it is not difficult to explain. Um, our Jewish brothers had very terrible exile experience in Europe and elsewhere. They were ejected from communities, they were killed in droves, they were persecuted, they were not allowed to do certain things. But the Igbo branch of the Israelite tree, very lucky, was tucked away in West Africa, rainforest part of West Africa, where nobody disturbed them for centuries. So they practiced the culture of their ancestors for centuries and even millennia without any outside influence until they began to do what their ancestors did. In times past in Israel, they began to fall short of the culture, and then the punishment that goes with derailing uh, um, from your Israelite practices came in. The slave trade came. After the slave trade, colonialism followed very shortly, and then we suffered the genocide in the 1960s. The truth is that the Israelite culture among the Igbo is alive and well, very extensive. Up to tomorrow, even among the Christians, they still practice, they still hold on to the practices. Now, can give you a few examples. Circumcision on the eighth day is a given. You will never see an Igbo male child that is more than 8 days old that is not circumcised. And even before that child is circumcised, the parents will not let you see the genitals. An uncircumcised person cannot sit amongst Igbos. He will not be accepted. And as a matter of fact, a certain German, a certain German historian noted, I think Andreas Oldendorf, that's his name, that Igbo slaves in the Caribbean refused to mix with African slaves that were not circumcised during the slave trade. They refused to mix with them. That is how serious it is. Among the Igbo, it is forbidden to eat blood of animals. The Igbos must slaughter the animals properly and bleed it out. And to do this, they must have a very sharp knife. And in my own community where I come from, there was a place with a slab of stone where people go to sharpen the knife they use to carry out ritual slaughter of animals. So eating of blood is forbidden. Among us, when we harvest our crops, one brother talked about it. You usually must leave some for the poor, for the strangers within our communities. In fact, my grandfather was so much known for this that people usually will hang around to know when he harvested his crops because they were sure to meet a lot of things on his farmland. He will make sure he leaves some. These are things that are recorded in Leviticus and Deuteronomy in the Bible. Recently, our concept um, what we call Igbo Dibo, the Igbo and Igbo there's a word for it when you train somebody to do a business and then you set him up. The Igbo Dibo, the culture also that is recorded in the Bible in Deuteronomy chapter 15, where a master takes on a very poor member of the community, trains him to do a certain business for 6 years. In the seventh year, he sets him up. Some business schools in the US are paying attention to this, and they call it the largest business incubation platform because it is something that has continued to generate a long stream of
Apprenticeship.
yes, Igbo apprenticeship. Bless you. So that's the word, Igbo apprenticeship. Um, of course, we have the laws of purity, whereby our men avoided their wives during the monthly cycle and also after delivery. These are things that our ancestors practiced. And among the Igbo too, a man who be married to one or two or more wives. They live in the same compound, but they maintain different living quarters. The man has his own living quarter, his wives have theirs separately. Um, Suicide is an abominable act among the Igbo. In fact, if anybody commits suicide, to take the invitation of people from a certain Levitic community we have, the Inri people, they have to come. They will take charge of cleansing the land because it is seen as an abomination that defiles the land. This is recorded also in Deuteronomy. Um, when the white people came here, they noted that certain things were not observed among the Igbo. There were no beggars, there were no prostitutes, there were no homeless people. Now, there were no beggars didn't mean that everybody was rich. It simply meant that the well-to-do took care of the poorer and weak members of society. So we didn't find beggars. As wealthy as the United States is, I found beggars in the US, I found beggars in the UK. But when the white man came to Igbo land, there were no beggars because the
Mm.
very poor, they took care of their very poor. Okay. These things are also recorded in Deuteronomy chapter 15, verse 7 to 8. Um, Now, there was a time some visitors from Israel came and they wanted to see an Igbo elder slaughter a fowl. They wanted to watch the process. And when the fellow did the ritual slaughter of a fowl, he followed exactly the prescription in the Torah. And the Israelis were amazed because this old man, he was in his 80s, an
Mm.
illiterate guy. He never read any Torah. He was simply practicing what his ancestors passed down to him. Okay. If we talk about marriage, we have very strong marriage customs. We practice even levirate marriage. Our people practice levirate marriage. Um, our food culture, um, all the forbidden things that you have in Leviticus, people avoided it. I remember during the genocide, I was a little boy. We went to the stream to fetch water, and inside that water there was catfish, and I was pointing it out to the adults that I said, why are we not catching the catfish? Why are we not eating? And they said, no, we don't even touch those ones. We don't eat them. And that it was significant that this was going on even when hunger was intense and people still struggled to obey their dietary laws. Um, so we had forbidden food items. We don't eat pig, we don't eat pork, we don't eat dog meat, we don't eat fish that don't have both scale and fins, and so on and so forth. There's another interesting thing. In our communities, you could go to your neighbor's vineyard and pluck his fruits and eat without permission from him. But you must obey a rule. The rule is that you only take the one you are going to consume. You are not going to collect it in a vessel. You are not going to collect it in a basket, and you are not going to sell it. But if it is
Mm,
for your personal consumption, you are free to take it and eat it. You will not
mm.
be breaching. You will not be breaching any laws. And these things you find it in Torah, in Deuteronomy chapter 23, verse 25. So we have a whole gamut. What I've given you is just a snippet. If you look at our burial customs, when you dig the grave, you do not hand over the digging implement directly. You must drop it on the floor. We find out that this is exactly what the Ashkenazi do when they dig the grave. Um, when somebody says to you that a certain person is the son of God, you remind him that, oh, God says that Israel is his first son. And if you want to know what the first son, if you want to know how God Hashem is related to Israel, find out from the Igbo the relationship between the first son and his father. If you understand that from Omenana, you will have an idea of what God means. I mean, what Israel means to God. Rabbi Mordecai talked about the new moon. Yes, we observe the new moon. In fact, there is one of the books by Chinua Achebe, the very first chapter of that book. It's a novel, but based on Igbo traditions. The first chapter was on the new moon when the chief priest in the community announced the new moon and the feast that was to follow. My mother is in her 80s. I asked my mother, how did you observe the new moon when you were young? And she told me the story. She told me the way they observed the new moon, the prayers they said uh, during the new moon. So this is it in a nutshell.
Thank you. Thank you.
Omenana is, yeah. So I want to stop here. So
I have one more question for you, Dr. Francis, because with all of those beautiful items that you share with us, there may still be people who are skeptical, right? There are people in America that say, okay, there are some tribes in West Africa that have quote unquote Jewish practices, but they say that's because colonialist European Jews came into Africa around the 13th to 15th centuries and they introduced Judaism in that area. So I want you to enlighten us and tell us just how long this has been the culture of the people in Igbo land, because there are some African Americans that actually believe that the Igbo practice the way that they do because Europeans came in the land during the 13th and to the 15th centuries and introduced Judaism there. Can you tell us why that thinking is wrong?
yes, it's a very wrong thinking because if you are talking about Omenana, you are never going to hear from anybody that Omenana started in Igbo land at a particular date. The fact is that our earliest ancestors that came here brought it with them. And this is not a tradition or a custom that you would, in our history, for example, you will not read anywhere that the Igbos conquered anybody and forced their ways down the throat of those people. And when they say Europeans brought Omenana to us, we are not the only people in Nigeria, and we are not even a coastal people. So why are the coastal people who the Europeans met even before they came further inland into Igbo land? Why did they not introduce Omenana or Judaism to them? Why did they have to come inland and introduce it to just us? It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. And Omenana is not something you can say it was started by this man. Several other religions, you can say, oh, this fellow started this or this fellow, but Omenana, you can't say that. It is something that is in the heart of the people,
Come
in the
on.
mind of the people, in the soul of the people. They just do it because that is what they got from their ancestors. It didn't start at any given date. So those who make such assertions, they are wrong. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so very much.